The British night bomber offensive against Germany during World War II saw a sustained effort to destroy the Nazis' military, industrial, and economic capacity. The cost to RAF Bomber Command was terrible. Over 55,000 airmen perished, but their sacrifice helped to bring about the destruction of the Third Reich. The Allied bomber offensive in Europe during World War II was conducted by two bomber forces, the U.S. 8th Air Force and Royal Air Force Bomber Command. During the 1920s, bomber advocates like General Billy Mitchell in the United States had predicted that large forces of heavy bombers could alone win a war. But his ideas and those of his fellow visionaries were slow to gain acceptance. In Germany, for instance, the Luftwaffe's role was confined to providing air support for the Wehrmacht, with little emphasis laid upon the strategic mission. The British, however, were convinced of the effectiveness of the bomber. Early daylight raids by the Royal Air Force were savaged by the Luftwaffe, and these losses convinced the British to switch instead to night operations. By the latter part of the war, Bomber Command had grown to become a mighty destructive force, twice the size of its American 8th Air Force counterpart. Aspects of the sustained night offensive remain controversial. Ultimately, the campaign to destroy cities failed to break the spirit of the German people, and German production of war materiel actually rose, despite the massive destruction caused. What the offensive did achieve was to tie up valuable resources to defend the fatherland. The Royal Air Force was steeped in the bomber tradition and recognized the potential war-winning role of the bomber. But when war was declared in September of 1939, much of Britain's bomber force was inadequate for the task of attacking Germany. The Bristol Blenheim light bomber carried out some outstanding unescorted daylight raids, but ultimately caused little damage due to its small bomb load. Many of the lightly armed Blenheims were also shot down by German fighters and flak. Without doubt, the best British bomber during the early stages of the war was the 5-seat Vickers Wellington. The tough Wellington could absorb immense flak damage and still get its crew home, thanks to its geodetic structural construction. Along with Blenheims, Wellingtons carried out the first British raid against German territory on 4 September 1939. For the first 4 months of the war, the Wellington was committed to attacking German ports and naval targets. It was thought that the well-armed bomber could defend itself against enemy fighters, But heavy losses were incurred during these unescorted daylight raids, and thereafter, the RAF switched to attacking Germany by night. Until May of 1940, the British government had imposed restrictions on the bombing of German cities, fearing civilian casualties. It was not until after the German offensive had opened in the West on 10 May that Bomber Command aircraft were permitted to attack the German mainland, although their objectives were strictly confined to military targets. Restrictions on British bombers were eventually lifted in mid-May, and 99 Wellingtons, Whitleys, and Hamptons opened Bomber Command's strategic bomber offensive, with attacks on oil and steel targets in the Ruhr. But due to the inadequate navigation equipment and outdated bomb sites, fewer than 30 bomber crews were able to identify, let alone attack, their briefed targets.
Okay, stand by. I'm going in a glide.
Of significance as a morale booster for the beleaguered British population, Berlin was attacked on the night of 25-26 August 1940. But from a force of 81 Wellingtons, Whitleys, and Hamptons, only 29 crews, just over 1/3 of the force, claimed to have hit the German capital. Despite these very modest beginnings, Bomber Command was aware of the shortcomings of its aircraft and their equipment. There was a pressing need for efficient night navigation and bombing aids, as well as to improve operational tactics. Hamptons and Whitleys were vulnerable. Only the Wellington remained able to hit Germany with any effectiveness, and until the arrival of new types, it was to remain the mainstay of Bomber Command. Fortunately for Britain, 1941 would see the arrival of 3 new, truly heavy long-range bombers. The first of these to enter operational service was the Short Sterling, which attacked oil facilities at Rotterdam in February of 1941. Though in many respects a good bomber, the Sterling was hampered in speed, payload, and ceiling by its small wing. One month later saw the first operational missions of the second bomber to enter service, the Handley Page Halifax, when 6 aircraft attacked the docks at Le Havre. Another heavy bomber to join Bomber Command at the same time was a twin-engine design, the Avro Manchester, which took part in a raid on German warships at Brest in March 1941. The Manchester's Vulture engines proved unreliable in service, and its undercarriage was also prone to failure. The Rolls-Royce Merlin was already in quantity production, and when 4 of these were fitted to the development of the Manchester, the result was an instant success and a true classic, the Lancaster. Entering service on Christmas Eve, 1941, it became a devastating and highly successful bomber, undoubtedly Britain's finest of World War II. As Lancasters began to replace Manchesters, Avro's own factories were unable to cope with the scale of the demand, and other companies such as Armstrong, Whitworth, and Vickers took on the task of assembling complete aircraft. In the U.S., Packard built Merlin engines under license. Development was already underway on another long-range bomber, which became one of the most versatile aircraft ever. A superlative night fighter, fighter bomber, and maritime strike aircraft, it served alongside Bomber Command Heavies as a light bomber, reconnaissance aircraft, and target marker, a task known as pathfinding. The aircraft, nicknamed the Wooden Wonder on account of its largely wooden construction, was the de Havilland Mosquito. It was entirely unarmed and relied on sheer speed to escape interception by German fighters. It was at this watershed in the fortunes of Bomber Command that on 22 February 1942, Air Chief Marshal Sir Arthur Harris was appointed as its new commander. He brought a new dynamic motivation at a time when the Allies were suffering repeated setbacks. Britain stood alone in the fight against the Axis powers, and the bomber was the only means of hitting back at the Third Reich. As the buildup in strength of 4-engine Heavies accelerated, Harris set out his bombing priorities. These were the progressive destruction of the Nazi military, industrial, and economic system, and the undermining of the morale of the German people to a point where their capacity for armed resistance is fatally weakened. Hermann Goering had declared that no enemy aircraft would bomb the fatherland. The time had come to prove him wrong. To underline its growing might, Bomber Command carried out a number of significant raids by day and by night during the early months of 1942. On 17 April, Lancasters carried out a brilliant long-range, low-level daylight attack on the MAN diesel works at Augsburg. In Operation Millennium, Harris unleashed the first of the 1,000 bomber raids on Cologne on the night of 31 May. Every single available operational aircraft was dispatched, as well as those culled from coastal and Army cooperation commands and training units. In total, 1,046 bombers set off, of which nearly 900 dropped almost 1,500 tons of bombs with devastating results. 41 aircraft failed to return. The next morning, Mosquitoes flew their first missions when they set out to survey and photograph the damage caused. Two follow-on 1,000 bomber raids took place on Essen and Bremen in June. Although British losses remained below 5%, it was decided that despite their propaganda value, such raids could not be sustained in the future. August saw the introduction of a major new bombing procedure, the use of Pathfinder aircraft. Flown by experienced crews, the Special Force would fly ahead of the main bomber stream and mark the route to the objective and the aiming point with specially colored bombs. With 950 bombers at his disposal, Harris was ready to launch the first of his great concerted bombing campaigns. This started on the night of 6th of March, 1943, with a raid by 442 aircraft against Essen. The attack devastated the Krups complex and caused far greater damage than all previous raids on Essen combined. One of the most famous and spectacular raids ever carried out by Bomber Command was Operation Chastise, the attack on the Möhne and Eder dams. These controlled the level of the River Ruhr, and their hydroelectric stations provided vital electrical power for Germany's industrial heartland. The raid was flown by 19 modified Lancasters, which dropped special mines, or bouncing bombs. Employing the same principle as skimming a stone across water, the bombs were conceived by Barnes Wallis, who had also designed the Wellington bomber. Tests proved the bouncing bomb concept. Although some serious early setbacks were suffered, the bomb was steadily improved. The faster Mosquito tested a development of the bomb known as highball. At the same time, Bomber Command set about forming a special unit for the attack. It was to be led by Wing Commander Guy Gibson, who, while only 24, was already a brilliant bomber pilot. Originally known as Squadron X, the unit came into being officially as number 617th Squadron. After intensive training, the squadron was ready for action by mid-May. On the night of 16 May, 19 Lancasters set off on the mission. Flying at low level all the way to the target to avoid German radar, they carried out their attack in the face of stiff resistance. 8 aircraft were lost. The bouncing bombs breached the main objective, the Möhne Dam, as well as the Eder. In 12 hours, over 100 million cubic meters of water were released into the Ruhr, causing widespread damage to German homes and factories. But this damage to Germany's industrial capacity was only temporary. What the raid did achieve was to raise the spirit of the British nation. One of the final night attacks of the war by Bomber Command has evoked a bitter controversy that has not abated since the end of the war. The attack on Dresden was carried out to support the Russian offensive against Germany. Dresden was an important rail center. After the raid on the night of 13-14 February, one of the most beautiful old towns in Europe had been devastated. Various estimates of the number of Germans killed ranged between 30 and 50,000. The first operational use of Grand Slam also struck at a key communications target. On 14 March, the Bielefeld viaduct linking the Ruhr with central Germany was attacked. Grand Slam, aptly called the earthquake bomb, dropped 2 spans. Five days later, the Arnsberg rail bridge near Hamm came in for similar treatment. This was the vital transportation link to German forces holding the Ruhr as Allies prepared for the final assault. From small and disastrous beginnings, Bomber Command had grown to become a mighty force of unparalleled striking power. Its efforts had played no small part in winning the war against Germany. Round-the-clock destruction of the Third Reich involved a massive and sustained night offensive, whose ultimate effectiveness remains controversial. What is beyond doubt is that the British bombers caused significant damage to key strategic industries such as German oil production. The cost in terms of bombers and the lives of Bomber Command airmen was horrendous. Over 55,000 were killed and nearly 10,000 more shot down and imprisoned. 1/7 of the entire total British service deaths on land, sea, or air. It took a very special kind of dedication to fly a night bombing mission. By their sacrifice, Nazi Germany was defeated.